suddenly now you got AOC totally freaking out, losing it on Friday. Oh my gosh, she's having a meltdown there on Capitol Hill and claiming that the Republican Party is anti-immigration, not even like anti-legal, or not even like pro-legal immigration, but like just anti-immigration altogether. And she's feeding out this kind of garbage. And I say this wanting you to remember that her party actually once stood for something. It actually stood for borders. It actually stood for having a better immigration system in which people could come here without all the red tape, and we'd know who the heck was here, because we can't, in the words of Dianne Feinstein, the late Senator Dianne Feinstein from California, we cannot become the welfare state for Mexico, okay? And yet here's AOC with her little tantrum.
About how this is about illegal versus legal immigration. They are attacking legal status and removing legal status. The Republican majority is anti-legal immigration in the United States. And I want to make that very clear, and I yield back.
The Republican Party is anti-legal immigration? Seriously? You see, this is what works for her, you know, in the Puerto Rican parade there, out in her bright red dress. This is what sells, right? Like, you're playing on these fears. And when you play on those fears, you have a shot in her eyes or ears of actually getting more of these people to vote for you. Her constituents now are all the people that are not here legally. Sassy, thank you for the generosity. Here she is writing, it is 100% carrying water for the opposition to participate in this collective delusion. The Democrats, for some reason, need to answer for every teen who throws a rock rather than hold the Trump administration accountable for intentionally creating chaos and breaking the law to stoke violence. They are in charge. But now we're like saying it's okay? Like, is this some twisted way of saying, oh yeah, we're good with violence? I mean, this is getting really, really weird, okay? We are never going to be okay. Never, ever going to be okay with violence. Let me make that very clear. And you know, you're going to lose people really fast. I think you guys would all agree with that, right? That you're going to lose people really fast if you're suddenly condoning any kind of violence in the streets. And by the way, that just gives more ammunition, guys, to Donald Trump to say, I'm going to go in with the feds. I'm going to go in with the National Guard. I'm going to take over the National Guard in a state like New York because they are the opposition. They are in the way. I mean, you got a senator who's feared as a security threat, and they're mad because Secret Service does what they need to do. The FBI does what it needs to do. AOC is mad because Alina Habba is threatening 17 years for one La Monica MacGyver after she was out and about at that event in New Jersey. She's the lady in red. That was her mistake, I guess, for wearing that bright red blazer. You can see her loud and clear. All right, coming through. I think one of you guys are joking. You're like, the redcoats are coming. She's coming, all right. She's coming right through. And so this is now supposed to be in some way, shape, or form tolerated. And by the way, let me just make clear, AOC's talking about teenagers there. That's no teenager that I'm looking at with La Monica, who's now facing, as I said, 17 years in federal prison. AOC said, don't you dare touch my people. These are my people. I don't think she's giving them very good advice, do you?
If anyone's breaking the law in this situation, it's not members of Congress, it's the Department of Homeland Security. It's people like Tom Homan and Secretary Kristi Noem. You lay a finger on them, we are going to have a problem.
A real problem, right? Is anybody threatened? I don't think so. I think that Donald Trump knows very, very, very well that you can't have this kind of lawlessness where you have states that are actually standing in opposition to basic things like controlling the border. You cannot have them saying, you know, we're not going to cooperate. It just isn't going to fly. I'm just looking at Charlotte's comment. I think she gets a kick out of LaMonica every time she sees her, right? Charlotte, thank you. Thank you so much for the generosity. LaMonica, right? Yes. Well, I'm sorry. I just kind of like saying the name. I do. You know what? I studied opera. You're actually going to hear me sing a little bit later in the show. I studied opera. I speak Italian. So La Monica, right? It's a great name, really. I mean, she just unfortunately doesn't quite live up to it. Her behavior alone, again, La Monica, unbelievable. Unbelievable. Okay, so, whether you get the Padilla guy out there, the senator in California, or you have this woman in New Jersey, I'm sorry, there's just no excuse for any of it, right? Like, that is not how we are to conduct ourselves. That is not how we're supposed to get stuff done. Let's have some law and order. Thank you very much. And this is Wilena Haba, charged one LaMonica MacGyver with violating Title 18 U.S. Code Section 111A1 for assaulting, impeding, interfering with law enforcement. And so now the grand jury handed back that indictment. She's looking at 17 years in federal prison. She could have avoided it all. The Newark, New Jersey mayor, he actually played ball and he got out of this. He got out of his charges. There's no indictment for him. In fact, he actually flipped the script, and he's actually suing Alina and the feds right now saying, how dare you go after me? But, he played ball. I don't know what this woman was thinking. It was pretty clear, there's some kind of impediment going on, shall we say. But she told Jen Psaki, Jen Psaki, who gets to do the Tuesday through Friday show and is sinking MSNBC like a rock, the little peppermint patty that used to work for one Joe Biden. And she took over for Rachel Maddow. And, well, she's doing worse than Rachel Maddow. Good luck for that network. Anyway, figures when you have guests on like this.
Well, Haba said you had declined every opportunity to come to a resolution. You said they wanted you to admit to something you didn't do. What did they want you to admit to?
I mean, there was a lot. We've had a week of back and forth with them, and I will say that I did not waver. I showed up there to do my job, and she wanted me to admit to doing things, all of these different lists of things that she said that I did.
Like what?
I mean, from things of impeding, there were some other things in there that she put in there, but I can't remember exactly what it was. But she wanted me to admit to these things, sign an agreement to them, and I'm not doing that.
I mean, again, the tape, right? Oops, wrong one. Well, that one's doing her own form of impeding, shall we say. But, this is the real impeding. When you're out there pushing ICE officers out of the way physically, I think that's a little bit of a problem. And by the way, so does one President Trump.
That woman was out of control. She was shoving federal agents. She was out of control. The days of that crap are over in this country. We're going to have law and order.
We are. You know that? Imagine that. We're going to get it one way or another, right? One way or another. This rhetoric, however, I would say it's pretty threatening to the Democrat Party, to the survival of the Democrat Party. Because if you look at what's going on, I don't see her out there defending LaMonica. AOC was saying, don't you touch my people. Remember when the Newark, New Jersey mayor was arrested, she was all out in defense of him. And poor LaMonica, she's kind of hanging out to dry, if you ask me. I don't think that she is very beneficial to her party. She's a big problem for the party. But you know what's really going to come to a head this week? Letitia James and one Donald Trump, because the Ninth Circuit is going to be deciding on whether or not the feds can actually federalize the National Guard, just like they did in California last week. Don't forget, Gavin Newsom was like, please have some decency. Please don't do this. How dare you?
Where's your decency, Mr. President? Stop. Rescind this order. It's illegal and unconstitutional. And I said it, I'll say it again, it's immoral. You're creating the conditions that you claim you're solving, and you're not. And you're putting real people's lives at risk.
Well, the judge felt differently. Originally, Gavin said, Governor of California, we need to stop this. He went in with an emergency request on Wednesday, perhaps, of last week. And it went all the way to the Ninth Circuit the first time around, the first judge said, okay, I agree with you. You know what? Trump can't come in and do this. And then literally 2 hours later, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals comes through and says, yep, you know what? That thing can stand. And the federal government can have that jurisdiction. So Gavin had to eat his words because on Friday evening, he was out there caught saying this.
Location for training exercises. But there's the bottom line. The police do policing. Military, it's for the battlefield. The idea that these unbelievably brave young men and women that I work with, that we have had the benefit of their extraordinary contribution all across this state. I gave you 3 examples. What more evidence do we need of the work they did during the wildfires in Los Angeles and all the work they did to secure locations and keep property and personal lives safe over the course of the last few months? These folks are now being commandeered to do ICE raids. You've seen the photographs. That ends tomorrow at noon. And the notion that the United States active duty Marines, these heroes, would be used to militarize the streets of an American city is an abomination.
Woo! I mean, first of all, that didn't end at noon. Now, did it? He had to eat his words because you see, the Ninth Circuit said, nope, you know what? It's going to stay. And perhaps they did that because they were worried about these No Kings protests that were going to be going on through the weekend, and they wanted to make sure that things didn't get too out of control. Or perhaps they did it because when they look at Title 10, U.S. Code 12406, which allows for the president to call into federal service members and units of the National Guard in such numbers as he considers necessary to execute the laws of the United States of America, maybe they said, gee, that Title 10 U.S. Code 12406 makes some sense here, because it doesn't look like California is actually going to be able to uphold the law. And so the question becomes, is this what will be used in the case of New York, in the case of Illinois? Interesting he left Texas off. You know, Houston actually does have its own issues, but he left that off because I strongly believe that he feels Texas will cooperate. So he doesn't need to worry about going into Texas and taking over the National Guard, because he doesn't have that kind of opposition. Texas is like, please help us. And he's like, I will. So, you know, they're all like on the same page. Again, this 12406 Title 10 does allow for the president to federalize the National Guard. Now, where it gets tricky, okay, and this is what Gavin's argument is, where it gets tricky is that it's supposed to be done in the cooperation with the governors. So, in theory, it would work like Texas is going to work, where Governor Abbott is saying, hey, I need your help. Donald Trump's like, I'm there for you, you know, and everybody's like hunky-dory, and you go in and you work together to get something done. But in California and in New York and in Illinois and all these very lefty liberal places, you're not going to have the cooperation of the local governors and the local AGs, and that's where you get stuck. Now, of course, we believe in state rights, right? Like this is partly what we were founded on. But at what point do state rights then jeopardize the overall country's well-being? That's why you have a constitution with things like the Supremacy Clause, with things like the Commerce Clause, because while state rights are indeed important, they don't trump it all, pun intended. Whoopee.
Now, you know, is it warranted, or does this sort of escalate the situation? I mean, whatever happened to states' rights? I thought that was what you do, because you tell the state, this is what we're thinking of doing. You know, you don't just send people in. You don't just send troops in. But what do I know? I've never run a state. But I don't really, you know, when you come in and everyone is, when you go into the donut shop to look for people and you're dressed in tactical gear, you're creating an issue. You're creating a problem. You want people to come. You've scared them. Even when people are supposed to be there, when they come to talk to the judge, you're arresting them right after. What is going on here?
I think what really matters from sort of a long view here is the fact that he is militarizing and deploying the Guard for the purpose of policing Americans' protest activity, right? Our freedom of speech, our freedom of assembly. And there's a very big, stark demarcation between military troops and law enforcement, public law enforcement, civilian law enforcement. Right. And you are an army turned inside to police its citizens can cause chaos, fascism. And
okay,
so I think
there we go, because it's all ending in fascism. Again, in fairness to Gavin, okay, he's saying, I want to do this in coordination with the federal government. You're supposed to be doing it in coordination with the federal government, but you got a problem here because you've got states like California where you just heard him saying, how dare they turn these great members of the National Guard who are out there trying to help our firefighters, et cetera, and now they're turning them on ourselves. Well, if you have a law in the books that says you can't be here, especially as a criminal, illegally, you're here illegally and you're a criminal and ICE is trying to arrest you and you've got basically local law enforcement or the National Guard not willing to allow for that, then you're kind of descending into some craziness, right? That's when you need to actually look at 12406. So again, whenever the United States or any of the territories, commonwealths, or possessions is invaded or in danger of invasion by a foreign nation, there is a rebellion or danger of a rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States, or the president is unable with the regular forces to execute the laws of the United States, the president may call into federal service members and units of the National Guard of any state in such numbers as he considers necessary to repel the invasion, suppress the rebellion, or execute the laws. And you know what? This has happened. Granted, you want to go through the governors. And if you can go through the governors, you do. But what do you do when the governors, like in New York and in California, are in the way? That is when you find yourself having to take over. And that is what the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals will have to make a decision on this week. Now, if they come back and they say the executive branch does not have this power to federalize the National Guard, think of what that would suggest. It would suggest bedlam, right? Because then states can do this, that, and the other all they want. It means like they are their own little islands, and that we're not cohesive as a United States of America. And if that, in fact, happens, I suspect it goes all the way to the Supreme Court and it gets challenged there. So gear up, everyone, right? This is going to be a very interesting time. We're fully independent here on the Trish Regan Show. We appreciate everything that you guys do. I'm looking at your chat. You had somebody in there who shouldn't have been in there, right? We got a few of those now and then. And so we have to kick them out, right? I'm a big believer in free speech. I think you should be able to say whatever you want, but there's no point where it can cross a line. So we're going to keep it nice and keep it clean. And I think you guys all know that. So thank you for alerting me. Don, I include you in that crowd to the wackadoos out there. Anyway, we do appreciate everything that you guys do. And I appreciate all of our sponsors here on this terrific show that help me bring you this show for free. And one of those happens to include our friends over at American Heart for Gold. Trish Loves Gold is where you need to go. You can text Trish to 65532, up to $15,000 right now in free silver. You can call them at 1-844-495-1115. Big article, I think it was in the FT, on gold today, and just how the whole world has been sort of stocking up on gold because it is that safe haven, if you would. They believe it to be the safe haven when things are getting really crazy. We do have it down a little bit today, down about 1.5% at 3,400, still sitting near an all-time high. But as I've told you before, I often go in when it trades down because it's one of those investments that I hold indeed for the long term. One of those things that I like having through thick and thin. We're going to talk a little bit more about investments coming up, including our Father's Day pick at 76 Research, because we got a good one for you. We got a really, really, really good one.